There's a strange pattern hiding in plain sight, and once you see it, you won't be able to stop seeing it. The people who retire early, at 40, at 45, at 50, almost never look like the people you'd expect. They don't drive the nicest cars, they don't live in the biggest houses, they don't have famous careers or six-figure salaries or wealthy parents who handed them a head start. They look like everyone else. They sound like everyone else. They blend in so completely that nobody around them sees what's actually happening. And that's exactly how they did it. Because while the rest of the world was chasing the appearance of wealth, they were quietly building the reality of freedom. While everyone else was upgrading their lives, they were upgrading their futures. While everyone else was performing, they were planning. And then one day, without any announcement, they simply stopped working. Not because they got lucky, not because they won anything, because 11 quiet habits, repeated for 10 or 15 or 20 years, gave them something most people will spend their entire lives chasing and never catch: their time back. Tonight, I'm going to show you what those habits actually are, and by the end, you'll understand something the financial industry will never put on a billboard. The loudest freedom in the world is bought with the quietest habits, the car that doesn't impress anyone, the apartment that doesn't impress anyone, the lifestyle that doesn't impress anyone, and the life that one day no longer requires you to trade your hours for anyone else's dreams. The first habit is the one nobody wants to talk about because it sounds too simple, too unglamorous, too uncomfortable. They live like nobody is watching. No performance, no display, no quiet need to prove anything to anyone. Most people don't realize how much of their spending isn't for them. It's for an audience, the neighbors, the coworkers, the strangers on social media, the version of themselves they want other people to see. They buy the car for the parking lot at work. They buy the watch for the meeting. They buy the house for the people who will visit it twice a year. And every one of those purchases is a small chain, a small contract, a small agreement to keep working for someone else's approval. But the people who retire early opted out of that game a long time ago. They drive cars that work. They live in homes that fit. They wear clothes that last. Not because they can't afford more, but because they finally understood that more was never the point. They figured out that the wealthiest thing you can possibly own is the freedom to not care what anyone thinks. And once you stop spending to impress people, you start saving at a rate that quietly terrifies the financial system, because the system needs you to keep performing, keep upgrading, keep proving, but they stopped performing. And that single decision freed up more money than most people make in a raise. Habit number 2. They treat saving as a bill, not a leftover. Here's what most people do with their money. They get paid. They pay their rent. They pay their bills. They buy their groceries. They spend on whatever comes up. And then, if anything is left, they save it. If anything is left, but here's the thing about leftover money. There's never any leftover money. There's always something, a repair, a subscription, a weekend, a craving. The leftover always disappears because that's what leftovers do. The people who retire early figured this out a long time ago, and they did something that sounds boring but changes everything. They treat saving like a bill that has to be paid, a bill that comes out first. A bill that isn't optional, isn't negotiable, isn't dependent on how the month is feeling. Before rent, before food, before fun. The savings bill gets paid, and here's what's beautiful about it. Once it's automatic, once it leaves the account before you ever see it, your brain adjusts. You learn to live on what's left. You stop missing it. You stop noticing it. And in the background, while you're living your life, that bill is silently building something most people will never experience. A balance that grows, a buffer that thickens, a future that draws closer every single month. They didn't save what was left. They left what they had after saving. That one reversal, that one small flip of order is the difference between retiring at 65 and retiring at 45. Habit number 3. They keep the same lifestyle when they earn more. This habit is the one that quietly separates the rich from everyone else, and almost nobody notices it. When the average person gets a raise, their life upgrades. The car gets nicer, the apartment gets bigger, the dinners get fancier, the vacations get longer. It feels like progress. It feels like success. It feels like the reward for all that hard work. But it isn't progress. It's a trap with a beautiful wrapper. Because every time your lifestyle rises to match your income, your savings rate stays exactly the same. You make more, you spend more, you save the same percentage of nothing extra, and the worst part, now you need that higher income just to maintain your new life. You're not free. You're more trapped than before. The people who retire early do the opposite. When their income goes up, their lifestyle stays the same. Same apartment, same car, same groceries, same Friday nights. But that extra money, it goes straight to the Freedom Fund, straight to investments, straight to the only thing that has ever bought anyone real time. This is the quiet secret of the early retiree. They got raises, they got bonuses, they got promotions, and almost nobody around them ever knew because their lives looked exactly the same, while their net worth quietly tripled in the background. They understood something profound. Every dollar your lifestyle absorbs is a dollar that can never buy your freedom. So they stopped letting their lifestyle absorb their raises, and they bought their freedom instead. Let me show you something, not a theory, a scene. Imagine two coworkers, same age, same job, same salary. They start on the same Monday in their 20s, walk into the same building, sit at desks across the room from each other. For 30 years, they earn within a few $1,000s of each other. They get the same raises, the same bonuses, the same modest promotions. From the outside, their financial lives look identical, but something invisible separates them. Every month, one of them quietly moves a portion of his paycheck into investments before he ever sees it. The other one waits to see what's left at the end of the month, and somehow there's never anything left. One of them keeps the same apartment for 15 years. The other moves into a nicer one every time he gets a raise. One of them drives the same car until it stops running. The other leases a new one every 3 years. You wouldn't notice the difference walking past their desks. You wouldn't notice it at the office holiday party. You wouldn't notice it for years. And then one Monday, 30 years later, only one of them shows up. The other is sitting on a porch somewhere, drinking coffee, watching the morning happen instead of rushing through it. Same salary, same career, same opportunities. Completely different lives. That gap, that invisible, decades-long gap between the two of them, was never about how much they earned. It was about 100 small decisions that nobody around them ever noticed. The quiet habits did the work. The quiet habits always do. Habit number 4. They understand time is the real currency. Most people think money is the goal. The people who retire early know better. Money is not the goal. Time is the goal. Money is just the tool that buys it back. Every dollar you spend is a small decision about time. Every dollar you save is also a decision about time. And once you start seeing money this way, your entire relationship with it changes. That impulse purchase isn't $200. It's a day of your life, a day you'll have to work to earn back, a day you'll never get to spend doing something you actually want. That subscription you forgot about isn't $15 a month. It's an hour of your life, every single month for the rest of your life, disappearing into something you don't even use. That car payment isn't $500. It's a week of work, every single month, for years, just to drive a slightly newer version of something that does the exact same thing as the older one. The people who retire early do this math constantly, not because they're cheap, because they're clear. They know exactly what their time is worth, and they refuse to trade it for things that don't return that value. They've seen through the illusion. They know that money doesn't buy happiness, but money, used correctly, buys back the hours of your life that you can finally spend on what does. And once you start thinking in time instead of dollars, you stop spending, because you finally understand what you're actually spending. Habit number 5. They automate everything. Willpower is the most overrated tool in personal finance. Most people think they'll get rich by being disciplined, by making good decisions every day, by having the strength to resist temptation, save consistently, and invest wisely whenever the right moment appears. But here's the truth no one tells you. Willpower runs out. Discipline fades. Motivation comes and goes like weather. The people who retire early don't rely on any of it. They rely on automation. The savings transfer happens on payday automatically. The investment contribution happens on the first of the month automatically. The bills are paid, the categories are filled, the system runs itself. They removed themselves from the equation because they understood something most people never figure out. You can't be tempted to spend money you never see. You can't impulse buy a vacation with money that was already moved to your investment account before your brain knew it existed. You can't lose discipline on a system that doesn't require discipline. Their financial life is boring, predictable, almost mechanical, and that's exactly why it works. While everyone else is making 30 small decisions a day about money and getting most of them wrong, the early retiree made one good decision once, automated it, and walked away. The system runs, the wealth builds, the freedom approaches, and they never had to fight a single craving to make it happen. Habit number 6. They invest first and learn along the way. This is the habit that most people get wrong in the most expensive way. They wait. They wait until they understand the market. They wait until they have enough money to really invest. They wait until they read more books, take more courses, feel more ready. And while they wait, the years pass. The people who retire early did the opposite. They started. They started before they were ready. They started with small amounts. They started with simple investments. They started and they learned along the way because they understood something most people never grasp. The biggest cost in investing isn't choosing wrong. The biggest cost is choosing nothing. Every year you wait to invest, the math gets harder. The compounding gets shorter. The mountain gets steeper. A person who invests a modest amount starting at 25 will retire wealthier than a person who invests 3 times as much starting at 40. Not because of skill, because of time. The early retiree didn't try to be a genius. They just refused to wait. They put the money in. They watched it move. They let it dip. They let it recover. They let it grow. And slowly, almost without noticing, they became investors. Not because they studied, because they participated. The market didn't reward the smartest. It rewarded the earliest, and they were always among the earliest, because they refused to let the fear of doing it wrong stop them from doing it at all. Habit number 7. They keep their circles small and aligned. You become the financial average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, not just in income, in habits, in assumptions, in what feels normal, in what feels possible. If your circle thinks debt is normal, you'll carry debt. If your circle thinks expensive cars are status, you'll buy expensive cars. If your circle thinks early retirement is impossible, you'll never even try. The people who retire early figured this out without ever saying it out loud. They quietly curated who they spent time with, not in a cold way, not in a snobbish way, in a careful way. They sought out people who lived below their means. People who talked about freedom more than they talked about purchases. People who had goals beyond the next vacation. People who could discuss an idea for an hour without needing to spend money to make it interesting. And just as quietly, they pulled back from people whose lifestyles were quietly pulling them into debt. The friend whose birthday plans always cost a fortune. The relative who couldn't see a number without judging it. The coworker whose definition of success was a new lease every 2 years. This isn't about being better than anyone. It's about protecting the energy and the assumptions that shape your daily decisions. Because the environment you live in will write the script of your financial life unless you write it first. The early retiree wrote their own script, and they only let people into the room who were writing something similar. Habit number 8. They don't chase the new thing. Every year there's a new trend, a new asset, a new way to get rich, a new shortcut everyone is talking about. And every year the people who chase it lose more than the people who ignored it. The early retirees don't chase, they commit. They picked a strategy, usually a simple one. Index funds, real estate, a boring portfolio that nobody on social media would brag about. And they stuck with it for years, for decades, through every trend that came and went. While everyone else was jumping from crypto to meme stocks to whatever was next, they were quietly putting money into the same boring thing, month after month, year after year. And here's what they understood that almost nobody else does. The strategy that makes you wealthy isn't the most exciting one. It's the one you can actually follow for 30 years without quitting. The new thing is exciting. The new thing is everywhere. The new thing also breaks most of the people who chase it. The early retiree doesn't need their investments to be exciting. They need their investments to be reliable. They've already decided that excitement comes from the life they're building outside of money, not from the money itself. So they let the new thing pass, and the new thing after that, and the new thing after that. And slowly, while everyone was chasing the next big thing, they quietly built the only thing that actually mattered, a portfolio that didn't need them anymore. Habit number 9. They never finance anything that loses value. Here's a rule the early retirees live by. A rule so simple, so clean, so unbreakable, that following it alone would change the financial life of almost every person watching this. They never finance anything that loses value. Let this land, because almost nobody actually understands what it means. Most people finance everything: the car, the furniture, the phone, the vacation, the wedding, the clothes, the electronics. They put it on credit, they make the monthly payments, and they move on with their lives. And here's what they don't realize. Every single one of those things is losing value the moment they buy it. That car they financed for 60 months? Worth half what they paid for it within 3 years. But they're still making payments on the full price, with interest, for another 2 years. That couch they put on store credit? Worth almost nothing the moment it leaves the showroom. But they'll pay for it for the next 18 months. That phone they're financing for 2 years? Already replaced by a newer model 6 months in. But the payments don't stop. This is the trap, not the things themselves, the financing of things that lose value. Because when you finance something that loses value, you're paying interest on a falling asset. You're sending money into a hole that gets deeper every month. You're handing your future to a thing that will be worthless long before you finish paying for it. The early retirees figured this out early, and they made the rule iron. If it loses value, they don't finance it, period. They save up for it in cash. They buy it used. They wait until they can afford it outright, or they don't buy it at all. Because the only thing they're willing to finance, if they finance anything at all, is something that earns, an asset, a property, a business, something that pays them back, not something that drains them out. And this one rule, followed for 20 years, is worth tens of thousands of dollars, maybe hundreds of thousands. Because every time someone else is paying interest on a depreciating thing, the early retiree's money is in a market, in an asset, in something quietly growing instead of quietly dying. That's the rule. If it loses value, pay cash or pass. The financial system was built to make you forget this rule. Your job is to remember it. Habit number 10. They make peace with being misunderstood. Here's a habit nobody talks about, but it might be the most important one of all. The people who retire early are misunderstood by almost everyone around them, and they made peace with it. Their friends think they're cheap. Their family thinks they're missing out. Their coworkers can't figure out why they don't upgrade their lives like everyone else. There's a quiet pressure, sometimes loud, to just be like everyone else, spend like everyone else, live like everyone else. Suffer in the same comfortable, slow way that everyone else is suffering. But the early retiree learned to sit with the discomfort of being different, to let people misread them, to accept that nobody around them would understand what they were doing until it was already done. And by then, they wouldn't need anyone to understand. This is the deepest habit, the internal one, the one that runs underneath every other habit on this list. Because every habit we've talked about costs you something socially. Living below your means looks cheap. Not upgrading your car looks weird. Saying no to expensive plans looks rude. Building wealth quietly looks unambitious. And if you can't make peace with looking that way to other people, you'll fold. You'll buy the car, you'll go on the trip, you'll match the lifestyle. Because the social pressure is too strong. The early retiree learned to absorb the misunderstanding without flinching. They smiled when people commented. They nodded when people doubted. And they kept going because they knew something nobody else in the room knew. The people calling them cheap were going to be working for another 20 years, and they weren't. Habit number 11. They defied enough. This is the habit that most people will never develop, and it's the one that quietly separates the free from the trapped, no matter how much money they make. They defined enough. A real number, a real life, a real version of I'm done. Most people never do this. They have no number, no vision, no finish line. They just keep working, keep earning, keep accumulating, without ever asking the question that matters: how much is enough? And because they never ask, they never reach it. There's always one more year, one more raise, one more promotion, one more thing to buy that will finally make them feel like they've arrived. But arrival never comes for someone who hasn't defined the destination. The early retiree did the hard work. They sat down, they did the math. They asked themselves what kind of life they actually wanted. Not the life they were supposed to want, the life they actually wanted. And once they had that picture, that real, quiet, honest picture, they reverse engineered everything. They figured out exactly how much they'd need to fund that life. They figured out exactly how long it would take to get there. And then they pointed every habit, every decision, every dollar toward that finish line. And here's the magic of having a number. The moment you have one, you stop chasing infinity. You stop needing more for the sake of more. You stop being a hostage to ambition that has no end. You start being someone who's building towards something real, something finite, something that finishes. And one day, sooner than anyone expected, they finished. So let me leave you with this. The people who retire early don't look like the people you'd expect. They don't have huge salaries. They don't have famous careers. They don't have the kind of lives that get talked about at parties. They look like everyone else. They sound like everyone else. They blend in. They're quiet. And that's exactly the point. While everyone else was busy looking rich, they were busy becoming free. While everyone else was performing, they were planning. While everyone else was upgrading their lives, they were upgrading their futures. And then one day, without any announcement, they simply stopped working. Not because they hit the lottery, not because they got lucky, because 11 quiet habits, repeated for 10 or 15 or 20 years, gave them something money can never directly buy: their time back. You don't need a huge salary to do this. You don't need to be special. You don't need to be smart, lucky, or born into the right family. You need the 11 habits and the willingness to look unimpressive for a while, because here's the truth that the financial system will never put on a billboard. The loudest freedom in the world is bought with the quietest habits: the car that doesn't impress anyone, the apartment that doesn't impress anyone, the lifestyle that doesn't impress anyone. And one morning, years from now, you'll wake up, and you won't have to go anywhere. You won't have to answer to anyone. You won't have to trade another hour of your life for another dollar in someone else's pocket, because you spent your years collecting habits while everyone else was collecting things. So here's the question I want you to carry with you for the rest of the day, the one that matters more than anything I've said tonight. How many of your habits are quietly building your freedom, and how many of them are quietly trading it away? Because every habit is doing one or the other. There is no neutral. There is no in-between. Every day, every dollar, every decision is voting for one of two futures: the one where you stop working when you choose to, or the one where you stop working when your body finally won't let you anymore. The habits decide. They always have. The only question left is which ones you're going to keep.